All right, welcome everyone to I Want to Be a Producer. It's our panel here at 1 o'clock on Sunday afternoon. I want to be a producer. Try and make it as gay as possible.
There we go.
I mean, already is, but you know.
All right, so today, I know it's it says it's a workshop session, but we kind of wanted it to be more of a casual, getting to know each other situation where we can talk about our different aspects of production, because the three of us have very different backgrounds and experience levels. So I guess we can start off with introductions. So.
All right. So I'm Christopher Spivey, currently Director of Production at Classroom Inc. It's a New York City-based ed tech nonprofit. We make educational games for middle schoolers, particularly learning games that increase struggling readers' literacy and reading comprehension. But in a past life, and I've had several, having been in this industry almost 10 years, I've worked for a variety of companies, mostly independent studios in New York, making games for the web, mobile games. I have one big company, credit to my name, Zynga, which I worked for a short time after my company was acquired. And otherwise, I went back to indie studios, and I think that's where I belong. So that's where I'm at now.
All right, my name is John Faciane. I am a localization producer at Voltage Entertainment USA Inc. in San Francisco. I got my start out in production professionally as a production coordinator in Tokyo, Japan, on the TV show Pac-Man and the Ghostly Adventures. So majority of my background, creative production-wise, is in CGI animation, and then for localization, it's mobile romance sims.
All right, and I am Lauren Komp. I also work at Voltage Entertainment USA Inc., but I work on the original side of things on the Omnimix team. And this is actually my first full-time paid job in the industry as a producer position, but I went to school to study game production. So my background is currently mostly visual novels, that sort of thing.
So I guess a natural kind of starting off point maybe would be to talk about how we got into the industry. Yeah.
Sounds good.
Yeah. So, like I said, I originally started out in CGI animation production. Before that, I was an English teacher in Tokyo at a university that I studied abroad at. I studied theater arts and Japanese in college, and I knew I always wanted to get into entertainment, either in performance aspect or the actual production side of things. So I guess I'm kind of living proof that you don't have to study game design or production to get a career in the game industry. When I was in Tokyo, I was always kind of looking for a creative outlet outside of my teaching. And it helped that I knew the language. So I got involved with an improv group, a comedy improv group that did improv in English and Japanese. And from there, I was able to eventually get an interview with a production house in Tokyo. And the production coordinator position is kind of, wow, that is really loud. The production coordinator position is similar to a lot of things that production does, but it's more of the actual, I guess, day-to-day, for lack of a better word, grunt work. It's a lot of like keeping people on task and scheduling, whereas once I got to my production role now, I really have to worry a lot more about budgeting and everything. So I guess that's how I got my start in the industry.
I guess I'll go next. So like I said, I studied game production in school for 3 years, started in 2010, graduated in 2013, and I had 2 internships while I was in school, one with a man named Joe Ybarra, who had he was one of the first several employees at EA. He worked on a bunch of different games at a bunch of different studios, successes, failures, the whole gamut. He knew what he was talking about, and that was as a community liaison, which was fun, but not really what I wanted to do. So I got a second internship with a friend of mine who has a tabletop gaming company called Little Red Goblin Games. And I was working on stuff with him for a while, for some class credits actually. And after that, it was really just busting ass and applying to places, not giving up on that. And that's when a recruiter found me and introduced me to Voltage. And I knew Voltage because I'd actually played some of their games. And my interview went off like it was so nice. I'm a huge weeb, and they appreciated that. So I have really just been doing a lot of grunt work as an associate producer. I've kind of had to carry a lot of weight to make sure things are happening because my teams have always been super small. Usually my teams are no more than 3 people, with me as the lower totem pole on that. So it's been a lot of learning, a lot of good stuff, a lot of what to do and what not to do. And now I get to work more one-on-one with our contractors and that sort of thing, which is really what I love about being in this track.
So I got a degree at a traditional 4-year university. I have a Bachelor of Science in Biology, natural history to be specific. So
Nice.
had no intention of going to the game industry. Actually, pretty late entry. I started my career in the game industry after the age of 30. I'm currently 42, so that makes me like 150 in game developer years. So, my foray was via a cocktail party where I ran into the co-founders of an independent studio in New York, and we were talking about our passion for games, and they were in need of someone with technical project management skills. And after I got out of school, I didn't pursue a career in natural history or ecology. Instead, I went into technology, so after a series of jobs. I was working for a large IT security company, basically. So we were, and I was the project manager for some really complicated, complex, Sarbanes-Oxley network security oversight, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, it was very dry, very boring, but it gave me an incredible amount of technical management skills, which they were in need of, these 2 guys, Wade and Josh from Large Animal Games. As well as more than that, though, being a small studio, it was a mesh of personalities that they really pursued me for, because small studios, even more than large studios, you have to have a good mesh of personalities because the culture is so tight and so compact. You cannot afford a bad apple in a team of 5.
Yeah.
Yes.
So,
We can both attest for that.
yeah, hiring the right person is absolutely essential. At any time, but even more so in a small studio like I've spent the majority of my career. Currently, as the director of production at Classroom, I'm a publisher producer now after having been on the developer side for a number of years. So I manage our developer partners and our vendor relationships. I'm responsible for project budgeting, feature prioritization, development scheduling, and keeping our project goals in line with our mission organization, primarily. And anything else that needs to be done. Because honestly, that's what a producer's
That is the true role of a
main role
producer.
is.
You kind of have to know how to do a little bit of everything to step in and help anytime anyone needs help with anything.
Yeah, that jack
thank you.
of all trades mentality is really important, and
You have to wear
definitely-
many hats.
Yeah, you definitely learn that your first couple of years in the industry. So I guess just to get a feeling of where everybody is right now, how many of you are students currently? Anyone? Okay, I've got a couple.
Cool.
Anybody who's in the industry already looking to make a change into production, maybe? Okay. Okay.
The ambiguous industry.
The ambiguous.
I like it.
All right. Well, we do have very different skill sets. So I focus mainly on localization.
And I focus on original content creation and contractor management.
Mm-hmm. And in an executive role, I am very focused on a top-down perspective. But being in a small publisher, I do, and this is the best part of the job, why I love small studios, is that I get to work in tandem, side by side with the development team, which is my primary passion for game development is being elbow deep, so to speak, in the guts of making the game.
Mm-hmm.
Small studios, all 3 of us tend to agree that they're really fun to work at. That's not to say there's anything wrong with big studios, but with small studios, you can really know your team that much better and can really make an efficient machine out of everyone you're working with.
Yeah, efficiency is one of those things that you either sink or swim in production. If you're not efficient, the industry has a good way of kind of weeding those people into different positions into the industry. So,
Right.
yeah.
I mean, game development requires a lot of dedication and sacrifice, no matter the size of
Oh,
the
yes.
study you're at.
Long
But
hours.
you don't need to make it any harder than it already is. So you're always looking for ways to do things cleverly and more efficiently.
Work smarter, not harder.
Yeah.
I guess that being said, hours. I guess you guys are here to know about the production life. That production life. Yeah, localization. Since I do work at a Japanese studio, we do have a head office in Japan, can have some pretty long hours. And it's definitely, most of those longer hours usually happen when you're more new into the industry. Like Lauren said, working smarter, not harder is better, and you kind of have to learn that as you go along. But
Yeah, no, I definitely spent my fair share of 14, 15-hour days within my first year, and occasionally I still have those days, and that's just what you got to do if you're going to hit your deadlines. And deadlines frequently are king, unless there's a very, very, very good reason that you're not meeting that deadline. So that's something you grow into and something you learn, and hopefully you have a mentor within your studio who can kind of show you, like, hey, this is a trade we've learned, this is a trick we've learned on how to do this better. And it's always about communication, I think, with everyone.
Very much so. I mean, the core responsibilities of a producer, especially on a team, is to increase the level of transparency, both up and down, and also radiate information in all directions. So you're a conduit for information, but you also need to be an attractor for information, meaning people come to you with like, I'm going to be late on this, so you should let Art know. Or more often than not, they'll say, I'm going to be late on this, and you have to make that connection about the dependency that the other team is waiting on, and then go communicate and triage and make a decision based upon prioritization, scheduling, availability, etc.
Yeah, and definitely with that, the I'm gonna be late aspect. I know newer producers have a little freak out moment the first time somebody says that to them, but production is really, you do have to make some difficult decisions sometimes, especially if you are going with something that is more creative, new from the ground up. With localization, it's a little bit easier because the content is already created, but for something that hasn't been created yet, then you have to make the decision of what features you want to cut to make your deadline, or if you push the deadline back. It's kind of a give and take. You have to weigh your options. Is it better to release a game that's not as close to your original vision feature-wise, or is it okay to kind of take the I guess financial hit of releasing something later than you expected?
Yeah, the budgeting's a huge part of it. Always will be. So.
Yeah, but in addition to just being sort of a translator, I'm sure you guys have found this as well, you also need to learn how to grease the wheels.
Oh, yes.
So being a bridge builder, an accommodator, and a facilitator, those are really important.
You have to be able to boost people's morale at any given time.
That's true, but a common thing that happens to producers that you encounter an issue or problem that you yourself cannot fix. So at that point, it becomes your job to find the person who can fix the problem, and then grease the wheels.
And one of my mentors, when I first got into production, one of the things they said to me is they sat me down and they said, look, John, you really have to be a therapist sometimes for your team. You do have to listen to everything. And it's more about listening and showing that you're listening. Because if it doesn't show that you're listening, even though you might be, then your team is unhappy, and it goes back to the greasing the wheels. You really need to make sure that everything is flowing smoothly and everybody has to be happy doing that. That being said, you also need to not forget about self-care, because when you're there all day listening to everybody's, I guess, either issues or complaints or things that might be going wrong, it can be a little trying if you forget to take care of yourself as well. Yeah.
That covers the basics, I think.
The basics, yeah, pretty much. So I guess, do we want to start asking questions?
Yeah, it might be an opportunity to open it up for
I figured it'd be mostly questions.
Yeah.
So it sounds like you guys didn't actually start necessarily in the field that you're in. My question is more particularly about how to transition from your starting field to another.
Network like crazy. Come to events like this and meet people and talk to people and go online and keep talking to them. The only reason I met the recruiter who got me my job is because I had so many connections on LinkedIn from these events that I would go to. And people who would say, yeah, no, I talked to her. She seems really, really driven and really, wanting to get into this. So it's definitely a huge part of it is knowing people and meeting people.
Yeah, and I'll say I lived in Tokyo for 5 years, and I studied Japanese language and culture. And one of the big things in Japanese culture that I think we, as an industry, can take is these are king. Like, this is your face. This is how you get to know people in the industry. And I've been to events before when I was a production coordinator trying to get people to get into the industry, and I've had people come up to me with resumes that were crinkled up or business cards that had writing all over them, and just kind of putting forward your best self when you network is really important as well.
Absolutely, and I think also I would just add a possible shortcut, and it depends on the studio that you're interested in. But certifications may be a way to open the door as well if you don't have prior history. And by that I mean project management certification like PMP, Scrum Master certification, et cetera. So getting those under your belt will sort of prove that you can speak the language of production, and that in of itself can facilitate a discussion sans experience. So.
And if you take the producer role on a small team project, that's awesome. Mm-hmm. Having those side projects, having those little things to show when you're meeting these people, when you're networking, when you're putting yourself out there, that's just another way to prove I know what I'm doing.
And passion as well. Passion goes a long way. Like, I've been a gamer my whole life. I've really been into the arts, entertainment, and all of that. And that really, having that passion there, it kind of propelled me forward when I was just trying to get into the industry. Yeah.
I would also say, just from an interview perspective, if you go in and someone asks, and it's a production job that you're interviewing for, and they ask ultimately what your goal is, and if you say anything other than production, like ultimately I want to be a designer, that would click in mind. It's like, well, you see this as a contour to pathway, and there's nothing wrong with that, but you should go for a design job if that's what you want. Production and design, there is, in my experience, a natural tension between the two as far as the creative process goes.
Yes.
I'm putting that diplomatically, right?
Yes.
So, which means that you are at odds often because design, they want to add, embellish, flourish. They want to make the game perfect. But there is no such thing as a perfect game, right? You can't ship a perfect game because it will never ship. Your producer's sole responsibility is to get that game shipped on time and on budget. Best game in the world doesn't matter if it doesn't ship. So there's where the tension comes into play between the creative and production. And being able to negotiate that tension well, diplomatically, in a way that enhances the development process, that's a skill, a soft skill, not something you can get in a Scrum Master certification. That comes from diplomacy, compassion, understanding, and also, this might be a good point to touch on it. Being a gay man, I think that I have an advantage in production in that particular facility because I don't lead from like an aggressive or macho perspective. I'm stereotyping, straight guys, but I often lead from a perspective of compassion and understanding because I think that's much more, well, my experience is it's much more productive, and it's easier for me to do, I think, sometimes, than it is my straight counterparts.
So I'm a co-founder of a video game company in Portland, Maine, and one of the main responsibilities is to facilitate learning. Like, that's the biggest priority because we're all college students that are sophomores and juniors, and we're publishing release products, but one of the biggest hurdles is how to teach everyone. As opposed to how to efficiently produce. And I'm wondering, like, have you ever encountered situations where you needed to focus more on learning and growth as opposed to production and, getting a release deadline?
Yeah, I can start this one. Definitely. And I can come from the position as the person who needed to learn. coming into a new studio, I don't know what it's like at your studio, but you have certain techniques that you know are efficient, or this is a good way to do it, and we'll listen to what other people have to say and maybe tweak what we're doing. So coming in and having to learn these new systems can be really intimidating for the people you're trying to get up to speed. So really, it's just, as the producer, as the head of the studio, you need to try and pinpoint the best way that person's going to learn. If it's one-on-one, if it's just throwing them in there with someone there to watch and make sure they don't blow anything up, it's just very get it done. That's the attitude I was taught with as well. My mentors, it was always, at the end of the day, get your work done, and that will speak volumes. So that's how I went about learning as well. Just learn it.
Yeah, I think having an open mind about education both ways is the best way to look at it, because like I said before, I came out of a Hollywood production pipeline, which is much different from a mobile gaming production pipeline. There's a lot stricter deadlines with more money on the line and all of that. So I had these things, the skill set that I had developed in that I tried to bring with me into mobile, and there was some friction there when I was trying to bring those in, and I didn't even realize that, maybe that didn't work in a smaller scale project. So I guess having that open mind and being able to listen to the people who are doing it on the day-to-day, that is a really helpful skill to have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, having a proactive mindset, and I think that's part of leading from the front, is that games aren't made by spreadsheets or checklists. They're made by people and teams. The spreadsheets and checklists are vital and important, and we live in those.
Yes.
However, again, it's people that make games, and that's what you have to understand and communicate and facilitate. And learning that is a large part. I'm an introvert with learned extrovert traits, so that was an additional sort of hurdle for me to do, was be able to learn how to put myself out there for communication, and being able to sort of be the hub of the wheel. That when all things are flying apart, the center must hold, which is not my natural tendency. Yeah. But in this position, you have to learn how to do that.
Did that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think pinpointing the learning ways for each person.
It can take some research too. I mean, my mother is a teacher, so I grew up having to watch her, figure out how to teach students with different needs and different learning styles. So there's a ton of research out there online, and there's tons of students who would love to talk about it forever, the students who are going into teaching, to kind of figure out, well, this is one way we can do it. This is another way I can teach someone to do it. And that's definitely, I think, a bonus skill that doesn't hurt going into producing, knowing how to teach your team.
Yes.
It's okay.
What's like the hard skill, soft skill balance? Because it sounds a lot of like really people out.
Yeah, it really depends on your aspect of production.
And the company.
And the company as well. For me, localization, the skill set really is you don't need to know the language, but it helps if you do, for me. And it helps if you have a background, not specifically like you're a pro, but you at least know the software that's used, that's required, and stuff like that. I think the thing that saved my life the most is just having experience with Excel and PowerPoint and the Adobe suite, the Creative Suite. Those are really things like, I guess, hard skills, if you want to call them that, yeah.
Excel or Gantt charts or the Agile Scrum method, those are becoming more and more used and more recognized as tools that producers use to keep their schedules on track. So if you can learn how to use those, I think that is sort of a hard skill, going in, having that information on how those methods work. But the soft skills like communication, I think communication is the number one important skill of this job track. And that's, how do you define that? How do you do that? You have to really put yourself out there if you're more introverted. You know, I did it in college. I never wanted to speak. I didn't like speaking in front of people. And I had an instructor who was like, I will give a 10% bonus to anyone who goes first. Anyone who stands up and says they will present their work first. And this was Photoshop. I'm not an artist. It was embarrassing at times. But like, you have to take those opportunities to put yourself out there so you can learn those behaviors of how to communicate and be more efficient and open in how you communicate. Yeah.
Did I answer your question?
So like a hard skill, like slur based.
It's so much.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, the hard skills, those are teachable. Those are really easy to learn. It's the soft, and yeah, like Lauren said, it's the soft skills that really kind of make up the bulk of this work. Another one that we haven't really touched on yet is bravery. You have to be brave to be a producer, especially once you go up the ladder, because if you're managing a team, you really do need to have the bravery to, if someone on your team makes a mistake, in the end, it's your neck on the line above theirs, and you need to be able to, work with that team member that might have made the mistake and have them understand it. But you also need to go to bat for them, protect your team, and so yeah, I guess bravery is a big part of being a producer.
I would say so too. I mean, you do have to be a lightning rod in a way as a producer, to protect your team, be an advocate for your team. It's an often overlooked role of a producer is that, like a lightning rod on top of a tall building.
Yeah.
You need to be the first thing that anything hits on its way down to the team.
And you have to be ready to take that.
Yes. So
and do what it takes.
to shield them from undesirable outside influences, basically.
Yeah. So yeah.
Definitely majority soft skills. If you can hone
Majority
those,
soft skills.
if you can hone those soft skills, learning the hard skills is easy, because, like we talked about before, there's tons of different programs and tons of different resources to learn it in a way that you'll totally grasp.
Right. Those mechanical processes are, out there and easy to learn. And also, as I said earlier, I think they're a shortcut to getting your foot into the door as far as a conversation starter goes for a production role.
Yeah, and I guess not to plug one side or over another, but I know some of the things that I've used to kind of increase my hard skill set is Treehouse, lynda.com. There's lots of places and resources online for younger learners. I know Treehouse, if you're a resident of Oregon, you can get access to it for free as long as you register with their job search service.
There's tons of stuff out there.
There's stuff out there.
I'd say the IGDA is also a good resource.
Oh, yes.
Absolutely.
There's a great
if you're a
production
student, especially, they have special student rates, and I was part of it when I was a student.
Yeah.
I haven't renewed my membership yet, but it's a wonderful, wonderful organization.
Right, and they have a great group of producers that are very collaborative, and you can go to the forums and ask, and you'll get some superstar answers from legendary producers.
Yes.
Yeah. I think you had a question as well? Ooh. Do we want to start with experience-wise?
Would you like to go first and I'll go last?
Hardest, huh?
Yeah.
Oh gosh. I think it's not a singular event. I'm going to cheat a little. I'm going to say that it's a continual challenge to remove my ego from the process, where I don't have a large ego, but it's easy to get bruised being a producer. you
Yes.
get buffeted and tossed around a lot
Yes.
by the demands and complaints and the requirements of the job. And ultimately, when you succeed as a producer, if you do things right, people won't be sure you've done anything at all. Mm-hmm. So claiming credit sometimes is a little difficult because when things go wrong, you're the first one they come to. But when things go right,
You're the last
Yeah.
that people will
it's
notice.
not necessarily
sometimes.
obvious that your work was influential in that. So it's you have to learn to remove your ego from that process, I believe, somewhat in order to make it sustainable.
It's
Yeah.
so hard to do that, you guys.
Yeah, it's very difficult.
it's so tough. It's something you learn.
Being humble is definitely one thing that, I mean, because when those successes do happen, if you do say, oh, well, I did that, then you come off as arrogant or, and you really kind of lose trust with your team, which kind of springboards into, I guess, my thing is, since I did move companies and I changed career paths and production styles, gaining trust was probably the hardest thing I've ever had to deal with. Because like people who know me outside of work, I'm a very trustworthy guy, I'm friendly, I'm outgoing, as you can tell from this, but
He came into a pre-established team.
yeah, coming into a pre-established team was very difficult, and I love my team, and it took me a long time to establish that trust, and not only establishing it, but fostering the growth of that trust, because just establishing trust is fine. You have to keep on moving that forward and having them trust you. So people come to you if there are issues instead of going to a different producer or things like that. So for me, yeah, I guess gaining trust was the most difficult thing.
I definitely agree with Christopher about the being bruised a little bit. Having to really tough it out. It's a learning process the whole time, especially when you're new at it, and I am the newest one here on this panel. So the toughest things I've been through is sort of the learning process itself. There's a lot of people who might look down just because you're new and might not want to help you learn, and it's finding those outlets of people who do want to see you learn and succeed and grow that make it better, but it's finding that can be tough.
Yeah. Springboarding off of that, I know comedians talk a lot about this, but I think it's relatable to any industry, especially production. For lack of a better term, you have to be willing to kill your babies. Sometimes you might have an idea that you
and
think
sometimes you never let go, like me.
Yeah, no, it's a balancing act, because sometimes you do have to be like, okay, well, maybe it is just me that's fighting for this one thing, and it's really not for the benefit of the project as a whole. And you kind of have to let it go. And
You have to have that overhead sight. You have to kind of keep your eyes on the horizon line all the time to make those tough calls. And that's a learned skill.
Yes.
So first off, thank you. It's a great panel so far.
Thank you.
What I wanted to ask is, so here at GameRx, obviously we're approaching game design and creation from a very queer lens.
Yes.
And a lot of us, we've been calling for more diversity and inclusion. Maybe this isn't super prevalent in, necessarily children's games, or maybe not super prevalent in localization, or maybe it is. Have you ever run into a decision, a production or design decision that you didn't agree with or didn't feel right to you socially or morally, and how did you respond to that?
Frequently.
It happens more often than you would think, actually. I guess being localization, for me specifically, you're dealing with content from another culture with different social mores and values. And you really have to balance a fine line between you as a person versus you professionally versus staying true to the original content of the game, especially in localization. I mean, from creative, it's a completely different aspect. In the planning stages, I'm sure you can probably shoot those down. But for me, I definitely have, in my actual professional life, I try and localize it enough in a way that it's not straying away from the original content, but it's also not violating my own personal views as a gay man.
It sucks to say pick your battles. I don't want to say that necessarily, but it can be exhausting to feel like at least the only one who's fighting to not do this really problematic thing. And it can be really, really hard, and it can make some of the longest days the worst days of your career, but then you find your allies and you find your friends within the office who also agree with you and are willing to say beside you, and stand there and say, no, I agree, this is a bad thing, or no, I agree, that's problematic, no, that's really not okay, so absolutely, there's always going to be different ideas, different opinions that don't always mesh together or are genuinely offensive or problematic. And as a producer, especially, you have to learn how to communicate with your team and communicate with the entire management sometimes to find that balance of like, okay, so we probably shouldn't go this direction, but I see what you want. I see what your intention was with this idea, so how about we do maybe this instead? I'll talk to the art manager. I'll talk to the writers. Let's take that intention and try to work it into something better.
That's a good point. Being able to discern an intended goal versus a stated goal
Yes.
is important. A design has this as its stated goal, and then you can divine that if you're lucky, that we can get through that goal through another path that perhaps is less controversial or more satisfactory or more open and compassion, perhaps more diverse. I'm kind of fortunate, I think, in that my history isn't. I've not worked on titles that have these kind of challenges typically. Games for Facebook and mobile, puzzle games, and now working in serious games and educational games. We don't encounter a lot of opportunities, I think, for really drastic sort of examples of either discrimination or misogyny or homophobia. Not that any of those would be supported in any of the studios I've ever worked for, which is another, I think, benefit of small studios is that just like they get to know you very quickly, you can know them inside and out before you step in the door and know exactly what you're getting into. There's no room for surprises often.
I think another thing that helps out a lot too with that is having your presence known. Being out. I know everybody coming out is a big challenge.
And
for
it's
a
a
lot
very
of people.
personal decision.
It's a very
you
personal
should never
decision.
feel pressured into doing it.
Yeah, it is a very personal decision. I personally didn't come out until I was much older, but now that I am, I feel like my coworkers are closer with me and they understand things more from my perspective. Yeah.
On that point, I'm very proud to say that by coming to Voltage, I did help more of my coworkers who are in our community feel comfortable. When I started at Voltage, people asked me, "Oh, that's a really cute lunch. Who made that for you? Or did you make that?" And I was like, "No, my girlfriend made that for me." And that was literally day one. I decided I wasn't going to hide the fact that I'm queer when I started, even though going into it knowing it was a Japanese company, that might have been a risky move, but I was 21 and I didn't really care. So, and it really has changed the whole atmosphere of the company. One of my very best friends had been with her partner, now wife, for 5 or 6 years and had not really known if it was okay to be out within the company space until I burst down that big rainbow door and decided to be out. That's not necessarily producer related, but I did talk to my own personal producers at the time a lot to make sure that they understood where I was coming from on some of these decisions made, because visual novels, it is a very it's a topic that doesn't get talked about enough, queerness in visual novels. So.
Yeah, representation is key.
Yeah.
I've been open and out in the interview process for every game development job I've done. So that's my choice. Everyone else can make a choice that's best for them. But for me, it was important for them to know exactly what I came in. If they were going to bring me in, they were going to get all of me. And honestly, having been the only gay person in some of the studios I've worked at, it's I think in some ways an advantage because you can temper discussions and add a perspective that is not present and maybe by some others in the studio not understood, but doing it with grace and understanding and with love, because these are your colleagues and coworkers, and you're collaborating ostensibly to make something great together. Diversity only adds to the chances of success, and communicating your perspective and your position with that in mind, who can argue with that?
It's a great secret skill set.
So like if you've ever applied to like AAA companies, and you want to stand out from the crowd as a producer, and like artists will go ahead and like create something that originates from the origin of the company's philosophy. I can say. And you just how these other athletes have ways and means of showing people like how they do and how they're exceptional, whereas producers struggle with like trying to build that identity and
I'm going to defer to them because I mean, Voltage is my first big job in the industry, so I don't have much on that.
Yeah, producers don't really get that chance to make a portfolio. I mean, you can have like a folder full of like projects that you worked on, but it's not like, well, I made this character design, you know, that kind of thing. So for me, it was really just showing my passion in the interview. Like my cover letters, usually when I applied to jobs, talk about how I'm a lifelong gamer, or, you know, how I do performance outside of work. You know, it's more showing that you're well-rounded, and also showing that you're a personable person. That sounded weird, but yeah, that you're, you know,
You're a person.
you're a person. Yeah.
It's true. Yeah, that's important. I mean, there's something called the maestro paradox. You know, the conductor of symphonies, where from the conductor's perspective, that it's the others that make all the music, but they get the salary and the credit. And in the interview process, that's the position to take, is sort of the maestro perspective. That the person, acknowledging that the person responsible for sort of the totality of the sound produces none. But game credits are a great way to do that. Metrics are another that you can cite. For instance, the game launched, did this on day one. Six weeks later was this. Our monetization was this. Our DAU was this. So it's adding your, you know, linking your credit as the producer with the success of the game is a direct link. I think that a lot of companies can see. I mean, you know, the people know what producers do. If you go to a game company, they know what your skill set is. It should be on your resume explicitly, and you should be able to also clearly communicate it as well in the interview process. But being able to link the successful products with your contribution, that's the best thing you can do. The best thing you can do in the interview process, I believe.
Having a personal website helps too, even if you don't have like artistic portfolio stuff. Like on my personal website, I just have a picture of me, and then links to my comedy performances, links to like just art stuff that I've done on the side, and then I have a link to my IMDb page where it's only got one credit on it right now, but anything that you can show linking yourself, like you said, linking yourself to that project is good.
I do that with my LinkedIn as well, instead of owning a website right now, just because it's not super viable. You know, LinkedIn has recently expanded their website to allow you to do so much. My profile looks like my CV. You know, it has every single thing I've done, even school projects that were a success. For example, I had a couple school projects that looked pretty good for student games, so I would definitely, when I applied at Voltage, at least, I put those on my resume as examples of, I did this.
Yeah, speaking of LinkedIn, that's a great way also. Recommendations are very helpful as well. LinkedIn is a great place for that. So people that you've worked with, former colleagues, current colleagues, they can add color to things that you've done successfully in a project. So here's a list of games I worked on, and it's clear that these games were successful. You can cite that. But then having people with anecdotal evidence add to that, saying that John was the lead producer on this project, and by his steady hand and constant vision, he was our North Star whenever the waters were, our most rough, and I would follow him again anywhere. Having someone say that, like a lead developer engineer, is worth its weight in gold.
As a producer, and that's especially important, because it's exactly what was mentioned. You know, we might not have character art or backgrounds or anything like that we can show, but by having your teammates who relied on you write those recommendations, that is what people want to see.
I just reiterate that recommendations are key, especially when you work in a form of production that isn't as visible, like localization, because the whole point of localization is kind of being behind the scenes. So it's kind of hard to show that.
Right. But reputation is key. I mean, the game industry, I don't know if anyone not in the industry realizes this, the game industry is incredibly small.
Tiny.
Everyone knows everyone, and I have a former boss who's got fond of making the saying that I'm one phone call away from every terrible thing you've ever done.
Yep.
And that's very true. So, make sure your reputation is good because you cannot hide it.
Do your work. Do your work, do your work, do your work. Do what you say you're going to do, and if you can't do it or if it's a failure, own it.
Own it, yeah.
That's it.
Reputation is so important. That's one of the best pieces of advice my mentor gave me as well. Own what you do. Even if it's a failure, even if it's a success, own it.
Yeah, ownership is a big thing. To me, I'm more impressed by someone who is willing to admit that they F something up, and then said, oh, I did that, I'm sorry. I censored myself a little bit.
We're used to not swearing.
Yeah, to me as a producer who does run a team, to me it's much more, for one, professional, and two, it shows that bravery that I look for when I look for a candidate. Like you're an adult enough to say that I messed that up, and I really am sorry, and I'll try my best not to do that again. One of my mentors said to me when I was early on, just coming out of college and wanting to get into entertainment, entertainment, whether it be film, television, or games, it's not always about what you know, it's about who you know. So your reputation is key.
Yeah. I mean, making games is hard, right? And failure is easy. I mean, that's the destiny of every game development project is to fail. And as a producer, your primary role is to change that destiny, and help that game be a success instead. I mean, it's so easy for a game to get mired.
Things go wrong so quickly without even realizing it.
Right, the best intentions, but you get a group of passionate people together, and things can fly off the rails, at the drop of a hat. So being able to negotiate that and turn failures into success, but also own them, like we're reiterating. I've certainly not worked on. I've certainly worked on projects that failed miserably, and I have a responsibility in that, and being able to one, admit that, own it, but also be able to cite, in a sort of retrospective manner. Here's where it went wrong. Here's my responsibility in that, and here's how I'm not going to allow that to do it again. Or myself or the team or what have you. Improve processes, improve, personal skill set, whatever it is.
You're constantly learning in this job, especially. So.
Yes.
I'm curious how you three differ in the kind of production methodologies that you prefer. Sorry, I missed the first.
No,
That's all right.
it's all good.
And the level of interaction that you have with other teams within your team, and how much of that interaction is due to you actively going out trying to establish relationships with other people.
Sure. I'll start. Since I'm the associate producer, I'm not a team lead or anything like that, but I'm part of a very small production team. Usually my teams are around 3 people, so we each have very important things to take care of. I specifically work a lot with outside contractors, writers, a ton. I work with a lot of writers all across the country. There's one girl in Canada, it's wrangling that. It's like herding cats sometimes. But I went to school to learn how to be a producer. I learned the Agile Scrum method in school, which is not a thing that a lot of people had before now. So that is definitely a benefit I had of going to school specifically for this. I got to receive that sort of failure-safe hands-on learning because there was nothing at risk other than my own education, and I wasn't going to let that, go to waste.
For me, it's really being a people person. There are, in the gaming industry, not just the gaming industry, but
every industry,
but really in the gaming industry, there are, I guess, you want to call them archetypes of coworkers, and really kind of knowing how to go.
Can you tell we work at a visual novel company? There's archetypes of people.
Archetypes, like someone who might be a system engineer might think a little bit differently than an artist does about something, and really just going to them and getting to know those people is really the best way that I've coped with that, is being a people person, I guess, a schmoozer.
Yeah.
Well, as far as production processes, methodologies go, I've done them all. And just a little side note on that is that there are a variety of processes, but picking the right process for the right team
Yeah.
not the project, but the team.
Yes.
Is vital.
You
So,
got to know your team.
you know, Scrum's been in vogue for quite a while,
Yeah.
but it is not a silver bullet. It's not a panacea or
Yeah.
a one-fit solution. And if that's not right for the team, then realize that up front. You can do that through, you know, easily by just missing deadlines or unhappy people or soliciting feedback. So processes aside, yeah, I've done them all, but I'm going to piggyback on John's comment, which is that it's people over process. That's my primary, guiding principle as far as game development goes from a producer standpoint. As I have a very hands-on work style. For instance, if an email goes beyond 2 or 3 bounces back and forth, I will pick up the phone and call someone. If an IM, if they're not in studio, if they're in studio, I'll just go over and talk to them.
Go walk
Yeah.
and talk
Yeah.
to people.
Go
There's
over,
no
walk over.
excuse sometimes.
Tap them on the shoulder, catch them on the, at a coffee break or over lunch, or take them out to lunch. There's ways that you can do this. Don't rely on the spreadsheets, checklist, the pivotal tracker, or the Excel sheet, etc.
You're going to eat a lot of lunch in this job.
Yeah.
What was it? Back when I was in as a production coordinator, I literally was sitting next to someone and I typed them an email. And then after I sent it, I was like, what did I just do? And I looked at them, I'm like, I'm so sorry. I should have just turned to you and asked you this question. But yeah, it's very important, not letting the mail chain go too long.
Just talk.
Talk, yeah.
Talk to them and getting them to talk to each other.
If you're a newer production company, like how do you go about getting distribution? I know you can have everything into a project, but who does it go with?
Oh, do you mean how do you get your game out there?
Yes.
There's a whole nother talk on that one, honestly. But yeah, that's it's distribution, marketing, packaging, sales.
Is there a resource?
There's platforms available out there. I mean, one's Steam, etc. But I don't know that we want to get too far into
Yeah,
this because it's
unfortunately, we publish our own games, so
Yeah.
we don't have to deal with that ourselves.
It's
at our
pretty
company.
nice, but
yeah.
So
yeah, I wish I had advice for
I'm
you, but
sorry.
unfortunately, we don't end up having to deal with that.
yeah, but I mean, I guess
This is the place to talk to people,
Yeah.
though. Go up and ask other people you
Absolutely.
see if they have any idea about it, and they will be happy to answer you.
And also, GDC. If any of you are local, GDC happens every March in San Francisco. If you're students, there are still there are student rates available.
And scholarships.
Scholarships
as
as
well.
well.
But that's coming to an end soon, I believe. So
Yeah.
if you want to get on that, do it.
Yeah,
do it soon.
GDC is a good way to get noticed.
CA, is that that's
the
another
volunteer
alternative.
program.
Yeah, the volunteer
Yeah.
program is also really good. You get a full pass. You have to guard the doors a few times on
Yeah.
a few sessions, but otherwise you can go into any session you want. I think is how that
Everyone I've
works.
talked to who's been a CA has absolutely loved it. They say it's an amazing experience and opportunity, and I have not done it myself yet, but it's definitely a way to get that free all access pass, and it's a great experience.
And another way to get noticed by publishers from, just from my knowledge of working in the Hollywood show, like I said, promote yourself. Don't be afraid to promote yourself. That's how you get noticed.
Unapologetically promote yourself.
They say shameless plug. Yeah, but
Play my game Astoria,
Yeah.
by the way. It's on the iTunes and Google Play Store.
No, that's true. I mean, do it in a non-stocky way.
Yeah.
Don't hover on the fringe or in its area. I mean, but have a communication. If you're going to communicate with somebody, make it be clear and straight to the point.
All comes back to being a people person.
Right.
And yeah, don't make it obvious that you're just talking to the person because you want them to do you a favor. 'Cause
Yeah.
Care about
that
people.
never works out well. We can see right through that immediately.
Yeah.
So
Oh, John, I know you know this other guy. Can you make
Yeah.
that connection for me?
no.
Any other questions?
No, we're running out of time, but
Are we? Oh, cool.
all right. Well,
All right,
I
well,
guess
this will
if-
be our final send-off, I guess.
Yeah.
You can find mine and John's games. We both work for Voltage Entertainment. Here's that shameless plug. Like I said, Astoria Fate's Kiss is on iOS and Android.
Yep. And I'm not much of a Twitterer, but I do have my own website. It's johnfaciane.com. If you're curious, check it out. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
my company's games are available on our site, classroominc.org, and If you have any questions, though, I think all three of us will be up here for
Yeah.
a few minutes. We're the last panel, so I think
Yeah.
we have the room for.
Yeah, feel free
Yeah,
to
so-
approach us.
Yeah, and if you see me like walking around, feel free to.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right, thank
Thanks
you,
for
everyone.
coming.
Thanks, everyone.